The fan. You always need to be careful when you put yourself out there on the internet. From what you look like to your personal information, you should always take precautions on what you do and who you talk to while you're out strolling through the interwebs. But one group of people out there that no one talks about, but probably should, are YouTube horror narrators. Individuals who should take heed of how personal they get, and most do. But for those who don't, it could mean dangerous and severe consequences. If you stop and think about it, they should take every precaution they can, especially the ones who go live and interact with their subscribers through live streams. They should always ask themselves, how personal do I get? Do I reveal my face? Do I give my name? Do I say which city or state I reside in? What I do or did for a profession? And probably the most important question is, who is this subscriber I'm talking to? Can I trust them? What do they truly want? Do they have nefarious intentions? Well, here's a story of what happens when you don't ask those important questions. A story where a narrator was a little too fast and loose with their information and came across the wrong subscriber who looked upon them in a weird, unhealthy, local celebrity-like figure that became obsessed and took it to the extreme. This story centers around the disturbed individual, Jake Bowles, who took his fandom too far. It started back in 2020 when, like so many other people, he joined YouTube to find videos to watch that piqued his interests. Jake, or Jakey, as he would sometimes be called, found himself drawn to two types of channels: anything having to do with wrestling and the horror story community of narrators. He integrated himself in the horror community from channel to channel. He went enjoying the stories, getting lost in the narrators' tales of woe. But something was missing. The stories were great, but the narrators just weren't doing it for them. He searched and he searched, feeling like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. This narrator's voice is too high. This narrator's voice is too low. Then he finally realized he didn't even like the female narrators in the horror community and narrowed it down to just the male narrators. After searching and searching, by mid-2020, he found a narrator's voice that was just right. And that channel was Shall We Recite? And the narrator's name was Joseph. From the first video Jake came across about true home invasion stories, he was hooked. Something about Joseph's docile, monotone voice intrigued Jake's brain. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it caused a stirring of emotions inside of him. He subscribed instantly and made himself known right away, popping up in that video's comment section telling Joseph that he found his channel and that he loved his voice and was instantly his biggest fan. From that day forward, Jake never missed a video upload and started going into the Shall We Recite live streams. At first, Jake was as normal as he could be, barely saying anything, then gradually making himself known more and more, being friendly to other members, trying to cozy up to the moderators, and after a month or so, he was well known by the members and mods that frequented the channel's live streams, even gaining the attention of Joseph himself. Not long after that, the normalcy faded and another side of Jake appeared. Many, as a matter of fact. You see, he made himself known by donations during the live streams. Frequent, generous donations that became to the point of spamming on most nights. It almost got to the point where you would hear from Jake and his donation messages almost as much as Joseph reading the stories during some live streams. He was an attention hog. Through these numerous donations, he painted himself as a sheriff's deputy with a pregnant wife and small son. His wife, whose name was Susanna, would also frequent the live streams as well, and also throw a donation out every once in a while. By each live stream, though, he became more outlandish, taking control of the made-up channel's fan club, calling himself the president of the Margarine Foot Club, started calling himself Joseph's best friend, even though he had never even met him, let alone talked to him in private. Started saying weird personal things about his wife and his donations, giving himself weird nicknames like the cerebral hemorrhage, acting like he was a professional wrestler with his weird nicknames, and saying only he can destroy the live stream's abundant sex bot problem. People started to become tired of his games, and some of the channel's regulars leaving the streams because of his nonsense, and others realizing his act was all bullshit and calling him out on it. It became abundantly clear that he and his supposed wife were in fact the same person. They were never in the streams together, and when he would rattle off some nonsense, a minute or two later, after he switched accounts, his wife would pop up supporting whatever weird comment he had just made. It wasn't hard for some people to figure out that his wife didn't exist, just by the way she would talk, regurgitating the same weird nicknames he called himself, and speaking almost exactly like he would. The only person who seemed not to notice was Joseph, whether that was because he was naive or the donations he was receiving. But Jake was allowed to carry on in a disturbing fashion. He started to become clingy and even creepy to some other channel regulars. More and more members were noticing this, and a few did some detective work to try and expose Jake for the liar he was. A few members found a YouTube channel with his name, Jake Bowles, except he wasn't a sheriff's deputy. Hell, he wasn't even an adult. He wasn't married either. He lived with his grandmother and mother, who he would belittle in a few of the videos posted on his channel. He was not a grown man, just a disturbed teenager that lived with his grandmother and mother, who seemed to have an odd fascination with washing machines and dryers, and the backs of old porcelain toilets by the evidence of the few videos on his channel. It came to the realization that these donations he was spamming every stream came from either the grandmother or mother, and became a running joke by some members on the stream that after every donation, Jake had just stole one of their credit cards again. This information was passed to Joseph, but nothing was done about Jake. And Joseph began to slip up more and more, getting friendlier with Jake, telling the stream what state he lived in, details about the city and neighborhood he lived in. It was becoming reckless. Finally, after what everyone else had seen for a while, Joseph began to realize maybe Jake was becoming a little too attached. What made him realize this was when Jake said he and his fake wife were going to name their newborn baby girl after him and call her Josephine. Joseph tried to distance himself from him by ignoring some of the weird donation messages and tried to be a little less friendly and open with him, but it was too late. It had been almost 2 years since the information had come out about Jake. He was older now and could drive, and he wasn't appreciating the distance that Joseph was putting between them the past handful of streams. On one October night in 2022, During one of Joseph's live streams, a loud bang could be heard in the distance. Joseph said someone was knocking on his front door and excused himself for a moment to go answer it. After what was a few minutes, the members heard a commotion and an argument shortly after. They could hear Joseph scream, "What are you doing here? How did you find me? Please, no, no." Then 2 gunshots, followed by another younger voice scream, "After all the money I've given you, you owe me. You don't turn your back on your best friend and your #1 fan." Then silence. The members on the live stream were horrified. The police were called by some of the members on the stream and by Joseph's neighbors. When they arrived, they saw Jake sitting on the steps of the front door. He was staring up at them, smiling sinisterly. The information that came out was that Jake began to break down more and more mentally as Joseph began to distance himself from him. He felt that Joseph owed him for his loyalty and friendship and all the money he had donated throughout the years, which came out, by the way, that he was funded by his mother and grandmother. And after years of massive donations bankrupt the family, causing the mother to get a second job, and old Granny Bowles to dust off her G-string and return to the familiar pole at Slick Beaver's Gentlemen's Club. It came out that morning, before Jake shot Joseph, Jake got into an argument with his grandmother over the family's financials and her having to return to the greased-up pole after an absence of more than 20 years. That sent Jake into a mental rage, and he bludgeoned his grandmother to death with her dusty stiletto, then grabbed Grandpa Bowles' old revolver, jumped into the family minivan, and took off. As he drove around, he started to think of the cause of his problems and came to the conclusion that it was Joseph, and him being ungrateful and turning his back on him. So he remembered where Joseph said he lived, which was the neighboring state, and he remembered the city and neighborhood details and put it all together, then went straight to Joseph's house and did the unthinkable. So please take this advice and consider this cautionary tale and pay attention to what you tell your fans. The book said soon based on a true story. I opened up the book. I read, soon based on a true story. I thought to myself what the hell it meant, and I wanted to find out, so I started reading. The man is out for blood and finds a red house. No parked cars in the driveway. Come to think of it, I live in a red house, and that there were not any cars at home. Mom and Dad are veterinarians and work night shift often. Well, this book is interesting, I thought to myself. Why not continue reading it? The man goes by the driveway to the first window he sees. He is desperate for blood. It was such a long time since a man had the taste of blood. He is thinking of smashing the window to get in, but he checks the door to see if it's unlocked. Surprisingly, it was. I got kind of concerned, knowing that the description of the house matched with my real house. I was a little bit scared, but this was just a stupid book, I thought to myself, so I continued reading. The man has had a lot of experience with a taste of blood. For the record, this is not the first time the man breaks into a house. It's quiet and dark in the house. Some leftover pizza on the dinner table and an old sleeping dog on the floor beside the dinner table. I started to get really scared because I had eaten pizza just before, and my dog was sleeping while I ate at the table. The man is out for blood. The man stabs the dog twice in the stomach. The dog gives away a silent, crying cry. Holy shit. My dog, it made a sound. What in the actual F? I thought to myself. The man tastes the blood. Such a delightful taste. Not as good as a human, but it makes up for a little bit of my craving, the man thought to himself. A human would make my evening, he thought to himself. He sees stairs exactly 12 steps away from his next victim. He knows there is someone up there. He just knows. He takes the first few steps. He can smell the victim. I started to hear footsteps at the stairs. The stairs were just outside my room. This must be some sick effing coincidence. The man is upstairs now. He takes out his knife and looks at the first door to his right. That's my door, I thought to myself. The man scraped the knife against the door. Soon, he would get what he wanted. Finally, he thought to himself, and opened up the door. The door opened, and I hid under my blanket. The last thing I thought to myself was, soon, based on a true story. One night at the horror hotel, I saw the advert for the horror hotel when I was browsing Reddit one night. It looked spooky and weird, my kind of place. It was like a regular hotel, but with a horror theme. The advert said it was so spooky that most people left before they had spent even one night there. Ha! I didn't scare so easily. I booked myself a stay. I drove out to the horror hotel as the sun was setting. Once I got close, it wasn't hard to spot, because even from the outside, it had been built to look like a huge old haunted house. I pulled into the parking lot and walked up to the entrance. Mist swirled around my feet. The first fright came at the front desk. As I waited to check in, the lights suddenly went out. All around me appeared other guests, but they were all ghosts. I couldn't believe my eyes. A creepy little ghost girl in an old-fashioned dress ran past me laughing. A spectral old man in a top hat smiled sinisterly in my direction. I admit it, I was scared, but I didn't scream. The lights came on and a man appeared at the desk. Sorry about that little surprise. It's a trick we do with projectors, and it's how we welcome our guests here at the horror hotel. He chuckled. Here are the keys to your room. Hope you packed a change of underwear, because when you spend the night at the horror hotel, you'll always end up needing them. I took the keys and went up to my room. Every room had its own theme. I passed doors to other rooms that had names like Ghost Ship Cabin, The Overlook, and Bloody Bridal Suite. I found the door to my room, Lunatic Asylum. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard whispering and quiet, crazed laughter. I spotted the small speakers playing the sound effects. Neat trick. As I lay down in bed, blood suddenly started running down the walls. I knew it was another trick, but I pulled the covers tight up over myself anyway when I went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night. There was a man in my room. He was standing at the end of the bed with a knife in his hand. He was wearing an asylum prisoner costume. I let out a blood-curdling scream as he ran from the room. I think I gave the poor actor the fright of his life. After that, I didn't get back to sleep. When morning came, I felt pleased. I had made it through the night. I went down to the front desk to check out. I hope you had a horrifyingly good time, said the man at the counter. You guys have the best scares here, I replied. That actor in the asylum costume was so frightening." The man looked surprised. "Madam," he said, "we don't employ any actors here." Grandma's house. For years, I haven't seen my grandmother. As I grew older, I wasn't good with keeping up with the family. Now, being 30, I decided I should reach out more and visit her. I called my mom and asked her to give me Grandma's phone number. When I first called my grandmother, there was no response. I called again. She picks up and answers, "Hello?" I respond, "Hi, Grandma, it's Paul." With excitement in her voice, she says, "Paul, I haven't heard from you in years. How's life in the city treating you?" I guess my mom kept her updated with my life. I moved to New York City last year when I got a new job in an accounting firm. "Can't complain," I responded. I proceeded by explaining how I wanted to visit her. "I'll send you the address. I have been learning to text more to keep up with technology," Grandma said with a giggle. We end our call. A few minutes later, I receive a text with the address. I didn't recognize it. She must have moved. Focusing on the task at hand, I get ready for a trip to Pennsylvania. I input her address on my Maps app and got in my car. 3.5 hours later, I made it. When I found the house, I didn't take the time to admire the details of it, as I needed to use the bathroom. I take the front steps to her porch and knock on her door. No one answers. I knock one more time. There is still no answer. I take my hand and grab the door handle. I twist it to find the door is unlocked. I open the door and let myself in. There weren't any lights on. Even with the natural lighting from the windows, it was still dark inside. I call out to her, but no response. As I'm reminded of the long drive without pit stops, I start looking for a bathroom before I continue my search for my grandmother. As I continue walking on the main floor, I realize all the doors are closed. I start knocking on each one and opening them. When I finally got to the last room on the right, I found the bathroom open. I head inside and close the door behind me. I hear footsteps above me. My phone vibrates, notifying me of a new message. It's my grandmother. The message reads, "I asked security to let you into my building, but they said no one was there." It hit me. My grandma lives in a nursing home. The address I put into Maps was the house she lived in prior to the move. If she is there, who is here? As I look up to the mirror in the bathroom, I hear knocking and a chuckle from the bathroom door. The last thing I saw was the door opening and 2 eyes looking at me with a face of malice and a smile for mischief. I think a haunted doll spoke my name to me. Summer before last, my boyfriend and I took a road trip to Omaha, Nebraska, with the main purpose of visiting the Museum of Shadows. We're both somewhere between believer and skeptic and thought it would be a great experience for us. Leaning in, he even paid the $20 to rent a spirit box to use as we walked around the museum. If you haven't visited the Museum of Shadows, I'd recommend it, even if only because I found it very cathartic. It's mostly dolls with tragic stories attached to them, but walking around reading all the stories of suffering and sadness, families associated with many of these items, was very heart-opening, for lack of a better way to word it. Some items I felt were just creepy, and that's where people's associated haunting came from when people own them. I believe sometimes people create their own hauntings by just being afraid of an object. Same with the dolls owned by children who had passed. The families are just so saddened and grieve so hard, they begin to assign their child's spirit to those items. It's so sad, but really made me feel a great connection to people I didn't even know, which I think is great for the spirit, however sad. So our spirit box was not giving us anything, literally not a single intelligible word. We were not angry or disappointed. It was sort of a neat if we hear something, but understandable if we don't, sort of thing, because we sort of assumed a majority of items in there could not be haunted. They've got this doll, Demas, and when I say my heart rate increased just typing her name, I'm not lying. And she lives in a chicken wire cage towards the back of the first floor of the museum. She is scary looking, not a normal looking doll. I got uneasy when I just saw her, and this is in a building of frightening dolls. Maybe that's intentional though. Maybe they put her in a cage to raise your apprehension. There is a sign above her that says if you choose to speak to her, so always say goodbye. Which of course you should do with any spirit, but Demas is apparently particularly malicious. I'm a pretty bold soul, so as we're standing there together with the spirit box, I decided I wanted to talk with her. "Hello, Demas," I said, and the spirit box just kept clicking. I didn't know what to talk to her about, but I'm always worried about lost spirits, so I decided to ask, "Are you okay?" And without hesitation, the spirit box said, "Amanda," extremely clearly. My boyfriend and I both heard it. I said, "Did it just..." And he was like, "Yes, absolutely. It said your name." I said above that I'm brave, but I was immediately filled with a sense of dread. Something about it saying my name and that we'd gotten absolutely nothing out of the box the whole time was terrifying, and I do not scare easily. I didn't continue the conversation. I just said, "Goodbye, Demas," and ushered my boyfriend away from her because I was so uncomfortable with her following that. Just now, I went through their Facebook feed to see if I still felt that same way about her, and saw an event where they let people hold her. I've never felt so appalled seeing such innocent-seeming photographs. That doll is the only item I've ever encountered that I am sure is 100% haunted, and maybe even malicious. The Last Voyage. Last night, as I was rummaging through the attic, I stumbled upon my granddad's journal. I was over the moon, eager to learn more about the grandfather I never had the chance to meet, as he passed away before I was even born. All I knew about him was that he was a biologist for the government and worked on medical cures. But as I flicked through the pages, my excitement turned to shock as I reached the final entry, a suicide note. In it, my granddad wrote about feeling guilty for his involvement with an organization called SS Nightshade. My heart sank as I read his final words. As I put the journal down, I noticed a letter lying next to it. It was addressed to my granddad and written by a journalist, asking for a comment on an article before it was published. The letter only added to the mystery and confusion surrounding my granddad's past. The contents of the letter are as follows. It was the year 1931, and the SS Nightshade was undergoing secret government experiments in London. Onlookers claimed to have witnessed an eerie green-blue glow that seemed to envelop the ship as her generators began to hum. In an instant, the nightshade vanished without a trace. Days passed and the ship was spotted in Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. But before any investigation could take place, it disappeared once more, reappearing back in London. The crew, however, were not the same men who had set sail. Some had gone mad, others had fallen ill with mysterious ailments, and some were said to have been fused to the ship, their limbs melded with the metal, still alive, but trapped in a living nightmare. The government, in their infinite wisdom, sought to cover up the incident, classifying all documents pertaining to the Nightshade as top secret. But rumors and legends of the cursed ship and its ill-fated crew spread, causing fear and paranoia amongst those who knew of the experiments. It is said that on certain nights, a ghostly green-blue glow can still be seen surrounding the Nightshade, a haunting reminder of the horrors that occurred aboard her decks, a chilling reminder of the dangers of playing God. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.